Gianna, can you see that the slides are presenting?
Yes, it's good.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent. So just that we confirm that everyone can see the screen. So my name's Amanda. I am one of the registered dietitians here at Functional Nutrition RX. Gianna is also here. She is also one of many beautiful functional dietitians here at Functional Nutrition RX. Gianna is going to be presenting the latter portion of the presentation. So, hey, Gianna.
Sorry, having issues at the house. Everything
Oh,
sorted though.
okay, good. Excellent. And no technical difficulties, so thank goodness. So, without further ado, we're going to first go into the mechanisms and some functional testing involved with regard to our lipid profile and our heart health overall. And then we will complete the second portion of the presentation with more dietary influencers and lifestyle modifications that we can take to control our heart health. So, if my computer resumes appropriately. So February is American Heart Health Month, which is why we chose to do this presentation this month. So we wanted to honor February, and we also wanted to present some fun facts about heart health. So our heart beats about 100,000 times a day, pumping nearly 2,000 gallons of blood through our body. Laughing can actually help us to increase our blood flow by about 20%, giving ourselves a little mini workout. It also helps to enhance nitric oxide production in our body, so we'll get more into that. Your heart creates enough energy daily to drive a truck 20 miles. So if you can picture how much energy or ATP your heart is create help utilizing all throughout your lifespan. And of course, another big driver or reason why we're doing this presentation today, and why we outlined our agenda as so, is because it's one of the number one killers of Americans. So we want to try to keep everyone as happy and healthy as long as possible. So, like I said, we're going to do an overview of heart health today, go into some functional labs and functional testing, and then end with some awesome lifestyle tips. So, heart disease risk factors can include diabetes, smoking, having altered lab values that we will go into, different dietary habits like diets higher in, or I should say lower in fiber, higher in trans fats or certain saturated fats, can increase our likelihood for heart disease, physical inactivity. Genetics can play a role in this, high blood pressure, and of course, our environment, especially if we're living in a very polluted environment or more urban environments compared to more spacious and cleaner air environments. So next we want to go into lab vital values and vitals. So first we're going to touch on blood pressure. Our blood pressure is very important. We should be checking in on our blood pressure at least about every 6 months or so. So our blood pressure normal is considered 120 over 80. So if someone's starting to be 121, 122, 123 for that systolic number, even if it's staying less than 80, it's now considered elevated, which is a newer criteria when it comes to hypertension. So those numbers that I'm mentioning is our systolic over our diastolic. So our diastolic is more so when our heart is at rest, and our systolic is more so when our heart is working. So individuals whose blood pressure is, say, about 110 over 80, that would not be deemed problematic. However, we're looking at stage one hypertension when you're seeing that systolic number rise between 120 and 139, or that diastolic number go between 80 and 90. Hypertension stage two, where we're looking, or the doctors are often looking at medication intervention, is at about 140 and above or 90 and above. So it's important to know your numbers and recognizing trends. So often I see individuals, they go into their doctor's appointment and their blood pressure is higher, and they go, "Oh, it's just white coat syndrome. I just get nervous before I go." And it's like, okay, well, Did you follow up when you went home, when you were in a relaxed state and retake that blood pressure? Do you, like what is your true relaxed blood pressure? So you want to take it without crossing your legs, without having a tight palm. And of course, sorry, just working with the screen there. And of course, if you can have someone take it manual, that's wonderful. If your blood pressure is elevated and you're trying to focus on lowering that, weight loss of about 5 to 10% total body weight, which can be about 5 to 10 pounds for some people, can be enough to help lower that blood pressure back down to normal for some. Some it could be more of a genetic risk, but like we say, and we will say throughout the presentation, our genes may, it sounds like a harsh saying, but it gets the message across properly. Our genes may load the gun, but our environment can pull the trigger. So with our lipid profile, there's what you consider optimal ranges and what you can tend to see as more like normal ranges. So total cholesterol is typically desired below 200. In the past, before pharmaceutical interventions and pharmaceutical companies started getting more involved in setting reference ranges, you used to see as high as 250 be the cutoff. So it's typically somewhere between 200 and 250 and below. LDL, the average optimal range is going to be below 100. For those with a much higher cardiovascular risk, you're going to see 70 and below for some individuals. So if we're of older age, maybe you have a past history of a heart attack or a stroke, you might see the doctor recommend 70 and below. For um, other, for healthy adults, often 130 and below can be the cutoff. So HDL varies based on sex. So the optimal range is going to be 50 and above for men, 60 and above for women is ideal. For some labs might have it that it's 40 and above for men or 50 and above for women. The ideal is truly the what I had just said previously, 50 for men and 60 for women. Triglycerides, ideal is going to be under 100, but healthy and at low risk for disease is under 150. You have your total cholesterol to HDL ratio. It's something important to look at, and optimal would be, of course, less than 3.5. Your triglyceride to HDL ratio can also help in determining if someone's blood sugars may be more related to stress on their body as opposed to just like sugar and carbs. So ideal is, excuse me, less than 3. However, normal reading, or excuse me, a westernized range would be more so less than 5. So again, this is important. So if someone's A1C is starting to go high, and they're questioning like, is it their carb intake or their diet, or maybe are they not sleeping enough? Maybe they have a lot of chronic stress. That triglyceride to HDL ratio can help to point in a deeper, more functional direction. And then, of course, we're going to go a little bit more in depth with this high sensitivity or cardiac CRP. So CRP stands for C-reactive protein. It's a major cytokine marker to dictate total inflammation in the body. So high sensitivity CRP is a better marker, as it's going to be less less flared due to, say, like a tooth infection or scrape. It's going to be more so about chronic inflammation. So when you're looking at lab reference ranges, the cutoff will be, if it's 3 or above, it's considered a high marker and that the person's inflamed. However, optimal is to be less than 1, and focusing on reducing your inflammation if it's, starting to get above 1. So we will go into more of those dietary influencers. You will also see that diabetes risk. If someone has elevated blood sugars or an elevated A1C, that puts them at a much higher risk for atherosclerosis and heart disease. So diabetes risk, which we should all be screened for at least by age 40, is a fasting blood sugar above 100 or a hemoglobin A1C above 5.7 would be considered a pre-diabetes ranges. Optimal, of course, is going to be ideally a fasting blood sugar under 90, 93, or a A1C under 5.2. So that's going to be more like ideal ranges. Apolipoprotein B and lipoprotein A we'll get more into. Those are other more functional labs to describe not just LDL, but what LDL breaks down into, both A and B. A is more like a tight granular kind of cholesterol, where B is like the big fluffy Michelin man style particle that could be floating around and bouncing around in the blood vessels, but not necessarily sticking. So now we're getting more into the chylomicron and how cholesterol breaks down throughout the body. So it first starts off as a chylomicron and gradually breaks down as it's going across the intestinal barrier into our bloodstream, through our liver. It breaks down into the chylomicron remnant, and you can see how it, for the fat particle, further breaks down from the remnant to VLDL, to IGL, to LDL, and that lipoprotein A. So lipoprotein A being the smallest, tightest granular kind that's mostly made the highest portion of protein, 20% protein and 80% lipid, more likely to stick and cause that atherosclerotic tissue. So each phase as this breaks down, it's coming from different sources in the body. So once that chylomicron is cleared from the liver is when it's becoming that VLDL particle. So sometimes when you see someone's VLDL elevated, that VLDL can mean that maybe their triglycerides are on their way down and that those triglycerides are breaking down into VLDL and then hopefully passing through the body. Or they could also be a flag saying, hey, this VLDL is high, likely going to break down into LDL, maybe lipoprotein A particle, and likely to stick in the body. So it can be a little bit of a flag marker that sometimes can be elevated on someone's blood work, and someone might just go, oh, it's nothing, it's not really important, but it can be a flag of, changes in the body. So lipoprotein A. Your genes control about how much lipoprotein A you make. So that's that breakdown product from LDL cholesterol. Typically by age 5, you have your adult level of lipoprotein A, and it will tend to remain in your body the rest of your adult life. So diet and exercise is not likely to change this very much. The most you can really change it is about 100 points. If high, you can take these steps, but it might be more indicative of familial risk for heart disease. So that's that tight granular kind that's more likely to stick to the blood vessels. And when it's tight like that, think of like caramel, especially if someone has elevated blood sugars. Now, fat and sugar mixing together in a liquid, it's sticky, right? So it's kind of like a visual I try to think of. And what happens when caramel cools? It gets hardened, right? So that's where that hardening of the arteries, that atherosclerosis. So we want to definitely try to control diet to the best of our abilities and be aware of our lipoprotein A status. So lipoprotein B can be high for different reasons as well. Same with lipoprotein A, or cholesterol can be high during pregnancy. If there's nephrotic syndrome going on with the kidneys, someone has high estrogen, they can have high cholesterol, especially if they're doing like estrogen replacement therapy. High caffeine intake can sometimes modulate this. And if it's low, it can be a sign of liver disease, low estrogen, and sepsis. So with ApoB, like I said, it's that Michelin man fluffy kind. It's floating around the bloodstream. If if you have that, it's more modifiable by diet and lifestyle. So if high, we can take natural steps to improve our heart health by exercising at least 30 minutes or more per day, eating a variety of fruits and vegetables, limiting processed saturated fats, staying at a healthy weight for us, avoiding tobacco products, and potentially having that conversation about, lipid lowering drugs in time with providers as needed. So you want to try to aim as a woman for your ApoB to be somewhere from like a 60 to 117, male 66 to 133. So next is just an image to detail that HDL cholesterol is kind of like the garbage trucks, and they're circulating the bloodstream and picking up like the garbage, like the cellular debris. Think of the LDL, the lousy, L think lousy, H think happy, LDL cholesterol, and moving it through the body. So H happy, we don't want to say good for cholesterol because nothing's neither good nor bad, because someone can actually have high HDL cholesterol. If someone's HDL cholesterol is getting, if I start seeing a trend, then it's going like 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, and it's really elevating, could be a sign that the body is, uh, immune system is working harder than it needs to, that there might be some kind of toxin present or heavy metal or something like that. The LDL cholesterol, of course, we don't want that building up and causing that atherosclerosis. So all of this plays an important role in heart health, in that it's all about the synergistic effect of the lifestyle or what's going on in the body. Someone can have high cholesterol and could just be like circulating their bloodstream and not really sticking. So if someone's inflamed, if someone has insulin resistance, that could be a recipe for that stickiness for the arteries. So inflammation, if you're looking at your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in your blood, or if you're seeing high lymphocytes, eosinophils in your labs, or of course your C-reactive protein, your high sensitivity C-reactive protein is higher. And on top of it, if we have elevated blood sugars and then have elevated lipids, then that's a trifecta for having coronary artery disease. So it's also about looking at not just one symptom, but the cluster of symptoms together. This is just an image just to further describe and go over how the plaque kind of builds up. That when you have this immune system activation and it's chronic low grade going over for a long period of time, say someone has elevated sugars in their bloodstream, that sugar is like a crystalline molecule, it's like glass, and it scrapes as it's going through the blood vessels. Maybe it scrapes hard at it because there's a lot of pressure because we have high blood pressure, right? So everything kind of comes together and it scrapes at that blood vessel and causes now a wound, small, but still a wound. That immune system is wee woo, gotta react, going to that site. And this is why you see in this diagram, like the monocytes at the bottom there, like these molecules here, if you could see my cursor, but or like monocyte adhesion, because it kind of gets like stuck in all these like cellular debris, and the body builds up almost like a scab, and that scab is not, super flexible and flamboyant, it's more so hard and rigid, and that's what in part what causes this hardening of the arteries, because other cellular materials get wrapped up in this padding here, as you could say. So next is just some blood work just to keep on top of, to be aware of, to talk with your provider about maybe once a year, doing it and trending your results. So of course, lipoprotein A we mentioned, apolipoprotein B. You can look at your lipid fractionation. So that LDL particle number, the more small density LDL particle numbers you have, the higher your risk for heart disease. So it can dictate medical management of your condition. Homocysteine is an amino acid that can build up in the body and can cause damage to the heart. So when you see pooling of homocysteine in the bloodstream, it can also indicate someone has a difficulty methylating. They might have certain genetic risk factors that impact their ability to properly absorb B vitamins and instead convert to homocysteine and damage the heart. One of those genetic traits are below, that MTHFR gene, which makes it harder to absorb certain B vitamins and properly methylate and therefore detoxify toxins through the body. So, or excrete toxins through the body. Your high sensitivity CRP is the better CRP marker to test, like we went over earlier. ADMA is a molecule that will pool in the bloodstream and when that builds up, it blocks cellular receptors for nitric oxide. So when you see higher ADMA, that means that the person's likely not having as much nitric oxide. So it tells you a little bit about nitric oxide status in the body, which helps to keep nice, loose blood vessels. It allows your blood vessels to breathe, essentially. Other genetic tests like ApoE, so there's the E4 allele. Someone who has ApoE4 is at a higher risk for Alzheimer's potentially and heart disease. It has to do with their metabolism of fats. So even if that individual eats all healthy fats like olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, but that diet's over like 35% fat, even if it's all great heart healthy fats, they're going to have a much higher risk for that elevated cholesterol and that heart disease. You can also look at these other genetic tests. So what these test lists are, they're called SNPs, so single nucleotide polymorphisms. So that's like the code in our DNA that just makes us all unique, right? So if you have that SNP, then you have this characteristic or trait that makes you unique. So you can test these through like a 23andMe or a 3x4 Genetics is one of the most credible out there. And you could take this raw data and bring that in, or we could go over ways that you can get this tested. Some of them you can get tested actually through your provider, like ApoE4 or MTHFR. You just might want to be careful in terms of insurance coverage potentially in the future, changing based on, maybe it being considered like a pre-existing condition, right? So, other testing is the calcium score. The calcium score is not perfect, however, it will tell you how much calcium deposits are built up along the walls of the blood vessels, but not necessarily the whole picture of all deposits, but it can be a great test to continue to trend. So any of these markers, we do like to trend with our patients that, we want to always have patients hold on to their blood work, and we want to try to recognize is something going up, going down over time, and help to modify it with diet. Metabolic syndrome is always important to go over when it comes to heart health. So it's a cluster of symptoms. If we're noticing that we have any of the three below symptoms, which would include having, that elevated blood pressure, that stage 1 and above hypertension, 130 over 85, if our fasting blood sugar is over 100, or like our A1C is over 5.7 per se, even if you're teetering that 96 sometimes or 107 glucose, if you're in that realm, it's definitely worth noting. A waist circumference for men over 40 inches or for women over 35 inches. This is getting at visceral fat, which we'll get to in the next slide. So waist circumference is just an easier way to measure and mention visceral fat. So if we're seeing the blood pressure rise and or blood sugar elevate, waist circumference build, if the HDL is low or triglycerides are high, any of these three clusters of symptoms considers us having metabolic syndrome and therefore a much higher risk of developing diabetes, heart disease, cancer, you name it, chronic diseases of the body. So if we think we have metabolic syndrome, we want to definitely talk with our primary care physician, and we definitely want to make sure we've had a recent A1C test done. We also want to check in with our cardiologist regarding medical management of the various conditions and checking in with your dietitian to manage from a lifestyle standpoint. There are different supplements that we can get into as well. Visceral fat. So visceral fat we measure with the InBody scale. So visceral fat is specifically the type of fat tissue that is predominant around the major organs of the body in our midsection of our abdomen along our waist circumference. So if, as you could see, like this heart compared to this heart, right, or this intestine system, if having all that extra tissue around the organs makes it harder to pump that blood through, harder to work, more stress, So those organs are not going to operate to their peak efficiency because of that. Thyroid testing is important. Sometimes when our thyroid, if we are going hypothyroid, it can cause our cholesterol level to rise. So often when women go through menopause, this is an important time period to be watching our lipid markers and including our thyroid because maybe, not maybe, when we go through menopause, we're at higher risk for autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's or to experience elevated cortisol, which also impacts our thyroid. I'll get more into that later in the presentation. When our thyroid is going a more hypo direction, it influences LDL receptors in our liver, which then therefore can cause our cholesterol to elevate. If our thyroid regulates the pace of everything in our body. So if we're moving more hypo thyroid, it can impact our blood pressure, our ability to keep our blood vessels elastic. It decreases our elasticity. And when blood pressure rises, it's going to, of course, impact other heart risks. Muscle aches from low thyroid can also be a part of this as well. Stress is a huge piece when it comes to our heart health. So you have your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus releases TRH to the pituitary, which then releases TSH or thyroid stimulating hormone to the thyroid to then create T4, T3, our most active forms, our active thyroid hormones. So if we're very stressed and we're leaning more into our HPA axis, our body is creating cortisol. And as you could see in this diagram here, cortisol suppresses TSH and T4 production because those building blocks to make T4 or TSH are also needed to make cortisol. So you will see an increase in cortisol and a decrease in those most active forms of our thyroid. So this is important to note as constant stress impacts thyroid hormone production as it goes down when we have constant stress. It's a sensitive feedback loop between the brain and the thyroid that gets disrupted, and then therefore that T3 hormone is reduced. So it can impact our weight as well when those thyroid hormones are altered, causing that extra accumulation around the waist circumference. So it can kind of cycle on itself there. So stress also impacts the body in regard to direct effect on the heart. So when we are super stressed, there is an inflammatory cascade where you're going to see increased platelet activation, fibrinolysis. So sometimes people will measure fibrinogen as another lab marker for heart health because of that. Leukocyte adhesion. So that's just like what we were talking about earlier when different immune system modulators or cells are traveling to an injury site in the blood vessel and they get stuck and then help to form that atherosclerotic hard tissue. Stress can also impact the heart by neurohormonal disruption by creating more ACTH, which is then downstream going to create more cortisol, can raise our heart rate, and cardiometabolic changes because of that, right? So increased risk for diabetes. We're going to pull more glucose into our bloodstream if our cortisol is higher, especially because we're releasing ACTH, and then increased likelihood for obesity, hypertension because of that heightened rate, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it does stress. So many people are like, okay, I just won't stress, and they kind of don't really take working on their stress seriously. But working on our stress will quite literally impact our heart health abilities, our weight in so many ways. But even though our weight isn't the main piece here from a vanity standpoint, just from a reducing risk of for chronic disease standpoint and reducing total body fat, focusing on keeping our muscle up. And now I'm going to pass the baton off to lovely Gianna to talk about the fun lifestyle changes.
Thank you very much, Amanda. That was amazing. You are very insightful.
Thank you.
So whenever you are ready, you can go to the first slide because we are now getting into how to deal with all this. So stress management tips. So, like this slide says right off the bat, excuse me, keep in mind that stress is not always a bad thing. There can be a certain balance of good stress and bad stress if we let it go too far to the extreme and become unhealthy, like Amanda was talking about before. But stress to an extent, such as strenuous exercise or stressing your mind when you're learning or studying, can be a good thing when we sort of get to that just manageable challenges. That's sort of that perfect spot you want to be at with stress. But like it says, you want to talk about your problems. This doesn't always have to be with a therapist you're paying to see. This could be with a friend, a coworker, a family member, someone that you're not even that close with, just to get it out. Even if it's not going to be solved, sometimes just airing it out helps relieve some of that stress already. And prioritizing your responsibilities, like it's saying, focus on the basics, focus on getting your sleep, focus on eating consistently throughout the day with whole foods, focus on spending time with loved ones, not letting our screens consume us and let ourselves doom scroll all day, making sure you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. This is incredibly important. We can't let ourselves burn out or fill up other people's baskets, because then who's filling up yours? And some time for self-care. We've got some examples here that you guys can try. I love the foot bath one. And again, keep things in perspective. And then to get a little more scientific about it, there's some supplements that I'll dive into quickly that better help with managing stress. So first is magnesium glycinate. And this is essentially a strain, if you will, of the mineral magnesium. And magnesium glycinate helps with managing stress in a few different ways. And one of these ways is first with helping reduce cortisol levels, like Amanda was talking about, that stress hormone, by reducing its pathway to get sent to the brain. And another way that magnesium glycinate can help with reducing our stress levels is through helping our nervous system self regulate. And by doing this, it's helping our neurotransmitters, those things that we know, serotonin, dopamine, these things that we may think of that keep us really happy, or other ones where if they are inhibitory of certain feelings and moods, just making sure that they don't go too far one way or the other and regulating them, keeping a good balance. As for 5-HTP, this is also known as 5-hydroxytryptophan, and this is a compound that comes from, so it's 5-hydroxytryptophan, which comes from tryptophan, which is an amino acid, and amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. A good example here of why protein in our diet is, again, so important. But what happens is the tryptophan is converted into the 5-HTP, or that hydroxytryptophan. And then this is another precursor to that chemical I was just talking about before, serotonin. So the more of the 5-HTP, the more of the serotonin we're getting, that more of those feel good emotions, reducing stress and anxiety, all good feelings. And then lastly, adaptogens. These are different compounds that we can get from food or we can get from supplements. Think of why there's all this craze for mushroom coffee nowadays. That's because the mushrooms in the mushroom coffee contain all these different adaptogens whose main role in our body is to help with dealing with stress, whether it can be acute or chronic. And so these are just some supplements that if you're looking for some additional help with managing your stress, you could look into. Go to the next one. So like this says here, avoiding some plate hiccups. This is a very common plate. It's known as the plate method. And essentially what you're going to be doing here with your plate, you visualize your plate at dinner. Right now, maybe you're having dinner, depending on the time of day, but you're going to have on the left of your plate, you're going to have half of your plate with your non-starchy vegetables. So that means your leafy greens, that could be some bell peppers, that could be your asparagus, broccoli, whatever it may be. And then on the other half, that's going to be split into two with your protein and then your starchy vegetables or your carbohydrates. So that could be potato, that could be rice, that could be squash, that could be corn, that could be beans. And then again, on the side, you see we've got water, or your 0-calorie drink for the fourth. So you can follow this plate as much as you can if you're not having a mixed dish sort of meal. Just visualize it in your head. Even if you're at work, you can sort of just visualize the plate in front of you and be like, all right, does this look like about half of a plate of vegetables? You're getting a salad at work. Does this look like about a quarter of a plate of protein? Just sort of get familiar with this in your head. You know, that protein serving size is typically going to be the size of your palm. So that's another way that you can visualize it as well. Keep going. And now just to get into a little bit more about cholesterol. So some examples here, we've got foods that are negatively impacting your cholesterol levels. It's going to be the things that you're not necessarily thinking cholesterol in food, but we're going to be more so thinking saturated fats and highly refined flours and added sugars in our foods that are going to be negatively impacting our cholesterol levels. So that's going to include things like the baked goods, fast foods, things that are really fried, things that have the high trans fat as well, high fat dairy products, processed meats. And then as for the triglycerides, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be foods that are, of course, high in certain fats, like saturated and trans fats. And then again, similarly, foods made with white flour and really high added sugar foods. And now some people may be thinking, well, how does that make sense? These are carbs. How are these going to be impacting my triglycerides or my lipid panel? Well, after in our body, we have our stores of our carbohydrates. But once these become full, if you're still consuming these really highly refined flours and carbohydrates, all that leftover gets converted into fat in the body, and then that's where it's stored. And then again, we've got alcohol here and then overeating in general. And as you can see here, it also says saturated and trans fats, just if you're unfamiliar, are the kind of fats that you'll be finding in animal products, things like also coconut and the kind that's going to be found in processed or packaged foods. And then outside of this, when we're looking at our whole lifestyle, things that can impact our lipid levels are going to be your genetics. Of course, some things may just be out of our control to an extent. Certain medications can be altering this, type 2 diabetes, smoking, physical inactivity, being sedentary, not properly managing your stress levels. There's that connection again, and a really poor sleep quality that could also then lead to irregular hunger, increased hunger cues, leading to overeating, eating these foods that are going to provide us with quick energy, such as sugary foods or high fat foods that we can absorb quickly so that we can feel more energized and awake. So it's all sort of connected here. You can go next one. Okay, so just to get into it a little bit more, I'm not going to read all of this for you, but just for what you should be looking out for to summarize, like I was saying, processed or hydrogenated vegetable oils. So we've got some examples here, and you want to see olive oil or avocado oil are going to be more ideal. These have these omega-3s, these anti-inflammatory fats versus these omega-6s. And these omega-3s are going to be really beneficial. They are, as you're saying, anti-inflammatory that can help with in tune relating to stress in the body. They're good for our brains functioning, cognitive functioning and development in younger years as well. And then we've got our high sodium foods. And I'll just quickly say, actually, some omega-3 foods too are going to include walnuts. You've got your almonds. We've got our chia seeds, flax seeds. And then we've got in our animals, the fish, you've got salmon, tuna, cod, all of those sort of things. More of the higher fatty ones, though, I'll say. And then the high sodium foods, we've got this little saying here, 5 is fine, 20 is plenty in terms of the percentage. So we want to be having up to 2,300 milligrams per day. And some common culprits here that we may not always think of are going to be things like cheese, soup, especially if the cheese is more processed, soups, your processed meats, cold cuts, those deli sandwiches. You want to try to tend for the lower sodium ones, maybe go for the turkey bacon instead of the regular bacon, some fast food, frozen foods, soy sauce, pickles. I know pickles, we look at them, we may think they're 0 calories. This is a good health food, but it's got that sneaky sodium in there that's going to catch up. And then we've got foods that are going to be high in saturated fats. Like I was saying, 5 grams are trying to avoid having more than 5 grams per 100 grams of food in total. And like it said before, it's animal products, coconut, high fat dairy products. And then the added sugars, wanting to have no more than 10 grams per serving, because that's going to be considered high. And some common culprits, as you can imagine, are going to be the sugar sweetened beverages, the sodas, the juices, lemonades, candies, baked goods, all the things that we commonly would think would have all that high sugar. You can keep going. So next we've got saturated fat in our heart health. So the complex picture, putting it all together. So what are these saturated fats? Again, it's going to be in those animal-based foods or the tropical oils such as coconut oil. And traditionally, it was linked to increased LDL, like Amanda said, the bad, the loser, cholesterol, and heart disease risk. But the controversy is that more recent studies, as in very recent, within these last 5 years or so, have been suggesting that saturated fats impact on our heart health is going to more so depend on the context, or maybe the type of food we're getting it from, which means dairy versus processed meat. And saturated fats from whole, minimally processed foods may not pose the same risk as those in ultra processed foods. So that could mean a sort of grass-fed, organic, low-fat beef versus getting it from frozen pizza or some McDonald's. That's going to be the big difference here in what we're saying, where they may both have saturated fat, but the quality or the type of saturated fat in each is going to be having different impacts on our heart health. And then LDL cholesterol increases from saturated fats may not always translate to higher cardiovascular risk. And this is sort of relating back to what Amanda was saying earlier about the size of the particles, and how if those particles are the really small ones that can sort of slip in and start to build the plaque in our arteries, getting them clogged, versus the really bigger ones that, well, they still may be this LDL, they're not necessarily going to be sliding into our vessels and getting trapped and building these clogged arteries over time. And so the current guidelines are still saying to have less than 10% of your total calories from saturated fats, and having them instead from the unsaturated, like we were saying, the olive oil, avocado, nuts, seeds, all those good things. However, with this new emerging research, it is important for us to say that it does require a more individualized approach and considering the overall dietary patterns of the individual and looking at their health as a whole picture. You the next one. Now, fiber. Fiber is king in these situations. Fiber is going to be your best friend for having good heart health. So it can help lower that LDL cholesterol. So it does this by, when we consume soluble fiber specifically, it forms this sort of gel or bind, and then that will bind to the cholesterol in our gut, and then it's excreted out of our body altogether, removing it. And then as a result, that cholesterol is going to be lower. So then when our body needs cholesterol to build other compounds that are required in the body, it's going to be pulling the cholesterol from the blood to make those compounds, such as bile salts, and therefore lowering cholesterol. Now, with regulating blood sugar, it's going to be sort of the similar idea, but also with slowing down digestion, because it's moving much slower through the body. It takes a longer time to be broken down and absorbed, therefore preventing a spike in blood sugar that can contribute to heart disease. So if you're having some simple complex sugar, pairing it with a high fiber food to help slow that down, such as a whole grain toast with your apple or some baby carrots. Not maybe eating that together, that probably wouldn't taste that good, but you guys get the picture. So again, with supporting healthy blood pressure, similar high fiber diets are linked to lowering blood pressure and reducing inflammation. And then finally, in weight management, like I was saying before, it slows down that digestion and absorption. So it's slowing that process of your food coming in after you eat. Therefore, you're full for longer. You're feeling more satiated. You're not going to be as hungry 2 hours after your meal. Maybe instead it'll be 4 or 5 hours after your meal, preventing that overeating and weight gain. So in terms of grams per day, for females, we want to be having 25 grams per day. And then for males, about 38 grams per day. And some easy ways that we can get this in. One I'm going to say right off the bat is going to be smoothies. Smoothies could be your best friend here. You throw in a bunch of frozen berries, some chia seeds or flax seeds. That could be a good way to boost it. But also always going for those whole grained over the refined grains. Even certain breads that even say they're seeded. You could see the seeds in them. They've got the fiber in them. Those ones are going to be great. Beans and lentils, add them to your meals as you can. Think of the plate method. It can be that starch for you. Having more fruits and vegetables in general, especially with the skin on, think of like a kiwi. That skin is really fibrous for us. And then having your snacks with unsalted nuts or seeds. And these may, like it says, they're small changes, but if you do it consistently long-term, it's going to lead to really big long-term benefits. Next one. So like I was saying before, what is this deal with cholesterol in our food? What should we be watching for? Like it says right here, cholesterol is not a nutrient of concern for overconsumption. currently, the evidence does not show a relationship between the consumption of dietary cholesterol and our blood cholesterol or serum cholesterol. For example, egg yolks may contain cholesterol, but they also contain 5 grams of saturated fat. So that's why we recommend limiting to up to 6 eggs per week, because those grams of saturated fat can add up over time. And so an example to help minimize that, if you really like having eggs or an egg sandwich, is having it with some egg whites and maybe throw in some veggies, throw in some spinach, some tomatoes. Then you're going to be getting that fiber as well, making it more satisfying, more full, and just to overall reduce, again, like I was saying before, overeating later. And then lastly, shellfish, also like shrimp, can contain cholesterol, but they also do contain sodium depending on the type and how it's prepared. So while you may be thinking, oh, that food is going to be impacting my cholesterol, it's not necessarily because of the cholesterol itself. It's going to be, like we were saying before, the saturated fats. It could be the sodium as well. It's going to be the added sugars and refined flours. You can keep going. So we've got the next few slides are going to be these Heart Smart foods, a little clever way to help you remember. So this is going to include increasing our healthy fats, like we were saying before, and again, filling up with the fiber. So that's going to be these foods like the salmon, the olive oil, your seeds, your nuts. And then for the fiber, like we said again before, the fruits, nuts, seeds, all these foods are sort of very similar outside of the fish. So you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone right here. Get your fruits and your veggies in, get your olive oil in, get your nuts and seeds in, and you'll be hitting both. You can keep going. And now cheese. So Heart Smart is going to be examples such as a low-fat ricotta cheese or low-fat cottage cheese, which I'll give you a little example. Low-fat cottage cheese, 1 serving, has also 12 grams of protein. And then a reduced sodium feta or goat cheese, fresh part skim mozzarella, reduced fat cheddar, any of those keywords you see there, reduced, limited, low sodium, looking for those words is a good example. And then here you could see on the nutrition label, when you're looking at the sodium, 200 milligrams, that's about 9%. That's going to be a good example for you here. The saturated fat is at 3.5, so it's less than that marker we were talking about before. Whereas the not so Heart Smart is going to be an American cheese slice. Even think of those Kraft single slices. About 1 slice could contain 25% already of your recommended daily intake of saturated fat. So you have 2 slices with your breakfast in the morning. We're already halfway there for what you need for the day, and it's your first meal. And then again, other pasteurized or processed cheese spreads or those super soft cheeses. You can keep going. So here's another good swap we could do. Rather than getting a bacon, egg, or cheese on a New York bagel, I know Long Island, we love these here, but maybe another healthier swap we could go for is whole grain bread with your eggs or egg whites, some tomato, and a third of a medium avocado. You see these calories get almost cut in half. Fat is cut in more than half. The sodium significantly decreased, and the same with the carbs, more than half as well. And this is going to also, it can taste just as good, especially with the right seasonings. It's going to fill you up tenfold what the other thing would have. And you're also not also going to be having a major crash afterwards because you're not getting as much protein and you're getting a lot more carbs in it. Okay. And then another example here, if you want to get some pizza, you can still get the pizza, but maybe just think rather adding into it rather than subtracting and thinking, now I can't have my pizza and all the things that I want in life. You still have that slice of pizza, but maybe add some greens and have a salad on the side. And rather than going for a regular whole Coca-Cola, maybe instead go for that unsweetened iced tea, even with some lemon juice on top. That'll give it that extra sweetness boost. You can see the calories here cut in half. Again, everything is cut down significantly. And like I said before, you're going to be getting incredibly full. You're not going to feel these cravings after. These whole foods are going to help curb that. And you're still getting the pizza. So you're not completely restricting these foods you love out of your diet. You go to the next one. And then finally here, we've got, for example, 1 pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. About the whole pint is over 1,000 calories, 57 grams of fat. We've got 134 carbs. There's a lot here. And now the Heart Smart food, it's saying, what is this mystery dessert here with significantly less calories, fat, and everything. So if we go to the next slide and we'll see just 2/3 cup of the Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Little trick there, rather than just saying screw it to the whole ice cream, still have your Ben and Jerry's, but try to follow the serving size and only get about a 2/3 cup. And like it says here, there's no perfect way to eat. We don't want to be making you guys believe that you can't have anything that gives you joy anymore. And there goes your ice cream and your pizza, because that's not the case. What we want you to see is that you can still reach your health goals and take care of your heart and your health for longevity while enjoying the foods you love, but also adding in some other foods that you may also learn to love as well if you're not always having them right now. So back to the basics here. And just this little side note that the American Heart Association's recommendation for added sugar is less than 36 grams a day for men and 25 for women. And so when we're looking at these beverages, this is where it can really sneak up on us, especially think even when you're getting coffee and you're getting some creamer in it, you're maybe not realizing how much sugar is in them. So just look at this Snapple. I mean, it's got the same amount of sugar as a soda. We're getting even more in a lemonade or an apple juice and a small coffee. You're getting 37 grams in the Gatorade. You're getting 26 grams. Now, maybe if you're having a really high intensity sweaty workout, you're an athlete, you're working hard, you need something in between the game, the Gatorade could be your friend here. But just having these all the time, just for the flavor and the taste, we may want to adjust for the lower sugar, no added sugar ones instead. Now, some better options we've got here, which we love, are some flavored waters here. So you can see some brands I'm sure you may know or love already. We've got Polar, we've got the LaCroix, I can never pronounce that one correctly. LaCroix, Hint, we've got the Pure Leaf, better unsweetened tea. And then on the right, we've got these sweetener packets that you can add into your drinks just to give it a little extra flavor without getting all the added sugar, and sometimes even getting additional benefits and electrolytes from the Ultima as well. And I think it's important for us to look at this note here about the diet drinks, such as Diet Coke, the Gatorade Zero, the Diet Snapple. These do still contain artificial sweeteners. And currently, there is very little evidence for their long-term health effects. It is something that is still being researched. There is not enough to sort of provide this clear-cut evidence-based claim on whether or not they're good or not good, but beneficial or not for our health long-term, if there's any risk and excessive consumption. And it's also not clear if it will actually improve people's diets or health benefits or not. More research is really needed here. Some people still say they're still having cravings even after the Diet Coke because there is still sweetener in the product. So it's not something that we currently want to recommend excessively instead. And now we're going to be diving into alcohol a bit. So alcohol intake, we all know it impacts our body significantly in so many ways. Mostly it's going to be impacting our liver. It can alter our ability to digest and absorb nutrients properly, leading to multiple micronutrient deficiencies, weight gain, and fatty liver over time, which can lead to a whole other slew of other health conditions. So currently, the recommended guidelines for alcohol consumption is less than 2 drinks per day for men and 1 drink for women. And these are the equivalents of that for each type of alcohol. So here we've got some examples for you guys of some substitutes, maybe some fun little mocktails that you guys could be having instead. So the first one is the Tart Cherry Electrolyte Infusion. And it's got the coconut water, cherry juice, lime juice, and the Celtic sea salt. And I'm going to say that while this not only can be just a substitute for drinking, it can also provide actual health benefits here. That Tart cherry juice is going to be helping improve your sleep. You're going to be getting minerals from the coconut water and the Celtic sea salt because it's not as processed, so it's got better content there. You're going to be getting some little extra antioxidants and vitamin C in your lime juice. So it's not just a drink to have rather instead of the alcohol, but you can think more of what is this doing for me? And then it's the same here with the lemonade. It's got that coconut water, the sea salt, the water, and the lemon juice. And like we showed before, you can use those true lemon packets if you don't have fresh lemon or juice on hand. These are some recipes courtesy of Functional Nutrition to try. And, just to wrap it up here with alcohol, if you are choosing to drink and you're trying to stick to these guidelines and you want to choose the healthier, as it emphasizes, options of alcohol, you could go for a red wine. It's got that resveratrol in certain amounts that can be beneficial for health. A Bloody Mary, vodka sodas, you get a drink with a seltzer water or in some lime or lemon juice added, a martini with olives, those low calorie and low carb spiked seltzers or beers that are lower, and also a spiked smoothie where you're still maybe throwing in some fruit in there to get some antioxidants. And then here we've just got some examples, more like we were showing before. These are heart smart little swaps you can make for your sauces, for your salads, or for dips. So easy examples are Greek yogurt, plain non-fat Greek yogurt, adding in enough spices and herbs or anything to it, mixing it up real good. You could pretty much replace any sort of creamy yogurt sauce that you like to dip in, whether it's sour cream or ranch. You can pretty much substitute Greek yogurt for all of it. Same with a shelf stable salad dressing for refrigerated or home made out of vinegar. French onion dip or ranch, again with hummus or guac or Greek yogurt with some spices. You can even get ranch seasoning packets that you add to the yogurt. And then if diabetic, of course, where we need to be much more careful with our sugar intake, we always want to be picking those low sugar barbecue sauces, ketchup, and mayo, because those are the spots where it really does sneak up. And then these are just some good brands that we like to recommend that you could write down or take a photo of if you like. Primal Kitchen, they have really clean ingredients. Tessemae's, Sir Kensington has really good condiments that you can have. Chosen Foods, Annie's, Fadi, I believe that's how I pronounce it, Foods, and then the new Primal as well. Now I'm going to throw it back here to Amanda to talk about some supplementation.
Thank you, Gianna. That was wonderful. So, yes, so for supplements, I want to definitely touch on fiber. So the average American takes in about 11 grams of fiber per day, where for women, we want to aim for about 25 to 30 plus, men about 35 to 40 plus grams per day. So if you're struggling to get your fiber up, you can look to take a fiber supplement like psyllium husk. For example, about 5 grams per day. You could add that to your smoothies. Also, chia seeds are a great, like almost like natural, if you want to think of it like a supplement, even though it's a food, just to add in about a tablespoon at least a day to get an extra at least 5 grams in per day there. Inorganic nitrate and beetroot juice supplementation has also gained a lot of steam in the past few years, being that it's been shown to be helpful in creating more nitric oxide in the body. So we had touched on that ADMA score, which is helpful at understanding one's nitric oxide status and how that impacts the plasticity of the blood vessels. So taking about 100 grams of beetroot per day could be something that you might want to bring up to discuss. However, you can also focus on eating more nitric oxide rich foods that are either rich in L-arginine, which is an amino acid that does help with creating more nitric oxide in the body from different proteins, of course, but beets in particular are very high producers of nitric oxide. Berberine may also be helpful in reducing cholesterol levels. Take in about 500 milligrams three times a day. So it's usually 2 pills 3 times a day. That may also be good for lowering blood glucose. Curcumin, which is the active form of turmeric, about 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. Also, depending on your stomach sensitivity, can be helpful for protecting the heart in that it helps to reduce that inflammation or that inflammatory damage on the blood vessels that we touched upon. And different probiotic strains have been shown to be helpful as well. So L-Reuteri, L-Planetarium, and Lactis UABLA12. So those can be found in the SFI product Therabiotic. This is also just in general a great brand of probiotic supplements that are also enterically coated to help those strains of bacteria properly get into the colon as well. But these particular strains have been shown to be helpful for promoting weight loss and promoting a healthier lipid profile by reducing triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol as well. Other supplement that we do not want to not mention is fish oil, especially if someone has elevated triglycerides or cholesterol. Fish oil is important. You want to first try to aim to consume at least 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week. But if you don't eat any kind of fatty fish, period, you definitely need to look at supplementation of fish oil, because if you don't get it from EPA, DHA rich sources, aka marine based sources, you can get omega-3s from ALA-based sources, which is the type of omega-3. However, to reach your total omega-3 needs and properly convert that ALA in the body, you would have to eat pounds and pounds of ALA-rich plant foods like walnuts and chia seeds that would disrupt the digestive tract. So supplementing in fish oil can be a good idea. And even if you have a high C-reactive protein and are eating 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week, and you want to still try to offset that inflammation, you can elevate that with the supplement. So some individuals do need higher amounts of omega-3s than others. You do want to understand your cardiovascular risk. So if you have a high risk of bleeding or are on any blood thinners, you want to definitely check in with your provider, your cardiologist, about omega-3 supplementation, because it does a good job of thinning the blood, right? So what omega-3s do is they help to reduce cellular adhesion as well, which is when those blood vessels can stick together and cause more so clots or thickening of the arteries. We do really like Nordic Naturals. They have the lowest total tox score, so meaning if you eat or go to take a fish oil supplement and you get like the fish burps, or you're tasting a fishy taste, highly likely that that supplement has oxidized, so it could have a higher total oxidation value. So Nordic Natural tends to have some of the purest fish oil on the market, and believe it or not, Kirkland. So they're both very highly ranked, Kirkland and Nordic Naturals. So we definitely like the Ultimate Omega by Nordic Naturals, and a dosage of about 1.5 to 3 grams per day can help to reduce total cholesterol and increase HDL cholesterol over 20%. So we do try to gradually phase this with patients, but the first thing, of course, is focusing on diet and stress management, right? That low-hanging fruit is the first step before supplementation. So all those other tips that Gianna had mentioned, we want to definitely be, doing pretty solid first before saying, okay, let's spend X amount of money per month on supplements. They're good, they're important, but a lot you can get from diet. Total types of fish oil, there's ethyl esters and the natural triglyceride form. So the esterified is what you're going to see in more of those pharmaceutical grade fish oils, like the Visipas, for example. It's not real fish oil. So we do prefer our patients utilize more of like a Nordic Naturals, and it can also be more cost savings, that they're getting a pure, cleaner form of the omega-3, and also for the better price point as well. 200 a month versus $23. My dad was on Visipa for a bit, and it really didn't do much for his triglycerides. But then we swapped that out with the Nordic Naturals, mainly because my parents were like, I don't want to be paying this kind of money for a Visipa. And I was like, well, you don't have to be. So, yeah, so that's just a personal share. But exercise is, of course, cannot be missed when talking about cardiovascular health. So it's called cardio for a reason, right? So performing, of course, cardiovascular activities like bike riding, running, walking, can all be helpful for our heart, including strength training, right? We want to also continue to strength train throughout our lifespan as well. Swimming can also be a great cardiovascular activity. You want to aim for about 150 minutes per week of aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous activity. Activity is vigorous if your heart rate is more elevated. So if you go to string together, say, two sentences to a friend while you're exercising and you have to give a big inhale, that's a sign you're in that vigorous activity phase. But a moment of perspective is maybe some of you are getting this presentation and you know all this stuff, and it just further reinforces what you're doing and further encourages you and pushes you to continue consistency. For some, maybe there's some aha moments in here and we have to make a lifestyle change. There's some fun, quotes that sometimes give me that extra nudge if needed. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? That's one of my favorites. If not now, then when, right? We all have so many things going on, and every time is a stressful time. Even if we can start and chip away at a goal, we'll be happy in a year from now that we made a small step each day, each week. Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. So many people pour so much money and energy into their car, their homes. Our body is our only home, if in the grand scheme. Your health is an investment, not an expense. Some people say pay now or pay later. And you can't enjoy wealth if you're not in good health. Health is the number one thing that we have. So we're here to help in any way. If you have individualized questions that you would like some more personalized conversation, of course, please feel free to reach out offline. But we want to thank you for your time today and for coming. Does anyone have any questions? No. I want to give a big, big thank you to Gianna. Wonderful, wonderful points and talking points and tips. But yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a good dinner tonight if you didn't eat already.
Let me say a good thank you, a huge thank you and shout out to Amanda and Christina with Functional. So much time and effort was put into this presentation, curating it perfectly. You guys are amazing.
Thanks, G. Keep shining and have a good night.
Take care, everyone.